This is a testimony of my life as it relates to a certain girl. When I was 16, a girl walked into a library that I was on the computer in that room. She walked in and started to talk to me. I instantly felt something happening within my spirit, something that I didn't know what it was. No longer than 5 minutes, around 5 minutes, she left, and I was sitting at my desk, frozen, staring at my computer screen into oblivion, wondering what had just happened to me. That was around September of 2009. Now it's March of 2017 as I am speaking to you. It has been over 7 years, and my love for her has not changed. It's the same, and in fact it has grown stronger. God has told me many things about this woman throughout the years, and I will share some of them with you, some of the major points, and I will also share about how I feel about Joy. I will first share about how I feel about her, and then I will tell you of some of the major points God has showed me about her. Joy is, to me, I see her as, well, there's a verse in the Song of Solomon that says, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you." When I hear that verse, I say it to be true because it's true for me and how I see her. From the bottom of her toes to the top of her head, she is truly perfect. She is altogether beautiful and without blemish. A lot of people think that might be impossible, but it's true. She is, to me, the most beautiful woman to have ever lived on the face of the earth. Throughout all of history, she is perfect in her beauty. There is not an inch of her or any part of her that is not the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Even things just like her eyebrows or her nose or her hands or her fingers or her fingernails on her hands. She is the most beautiful fingernails I have ever seen in my entire life. I feel like I could literally sit on a chair in front of her and just look at her forever, for all of eternity. When I was 17, I asked God once if Joy is my future wife to give me a sign in church tomorrow. The next day I woke up and went to church and realized that there is something different than the previous Sundays. Behind the pastor's head was a gigantic sign on the wall that said Joy, and then preceding the entire sermon had something to do about joy, I believe, or different points about joy, and many of the verses that the pastor turned to had joy in them or were talking about joy. In 2011, I asked God, when I was on my phone, I said, if Joy is my future wife, will you let the first thing I see in the images, in Google Images, be of a flower? And I typed into Google in the search engine something along the lines of, please answer me, God. And when I did that, I clicked on the images and I saw a picture of Jesus holding a little child pointing at a rose or some sort of flower. I was strengthened by that. I turned it off and I went back to try to find it later, and I wasn't able to find that photo. I was able to find that photo, but Jesus was pointing at something else. There's many photos on the internet of Jesus, of that, many different renditions of that photo of Jesus pointing at different things, but I have never been able to find the one that I prayed for long ago of Jesus pointing at that flower. But God showed it to me when I made that prayer. In 2014, I was staying at a house in Spring Hill, Tennessee when I was going to school in Nashville, and the owner of the house was renting out all the rooms in her home. She told me that her home was called the Promise House, for she said that God keeps his promises to those who stay there. For she had many testimonies of different people who have stayed at her house that have had their relationships restored. A few weeks later, I was walking down a sidewalk in that neighborhood. I was praying to God, and I said, God, if Joy is my future wife, can you please give me a sign? I said that a few times and said it again. If Joy is my future wife, can you please give me a sign? And before, right when the word sign was leaving my lips, I was, God, can you please give me a sign? I look up and I see a street sign in the distance that, to my perspective, says Joy. He answered me for what I was praying for. In 2016, I was suffering on a golf course in the green. Some of the most intense suffering I ever did in my entire life. And I ended up on my back looking up at the sky. And I saw 4 flashes of light, brighter than any of the surrounding stars. And then 7 months later, I was reading an article, and I realized at the bottom of the article they said that rainbows were mentioned in scripture 4 times in 4 different places. And I remember the 4 lights in the sky. And I went out on that golf course on the same green that I had been at 7 months earlier when I was suffering. And I was talking to God. I said, God, what I believe that you were telling me when you showed me those 4 flashes of light was that I haven't forgotten my promises that I made to you. I haven't forgotten about the promises I made to you, James. And as the very first syllable of the word of James was leaving my mouth, I saw a flash of light to my left, and I looked over and I saw this, what seemed to be some sort of shooting star. It looked different than a shooting star, though it was brighter, and it shot across the sky in sort of an arcing-like motion. And I realized that God was confirming what I was saying, that he had not forgotten his promises that he made to me. And that arcing-like motion was referring to the rainbow. That the rainbow was mentioned 4 times in scripture. He showed me 4 lights in the sky. And throughout the 7 years, he has shown me 4 different rainbows. 2 of them were separate, and the 3rd one was a double rainbow. 4 different rainbows. The times where I needed it the most, or I was suffering, I would look up and I would see a rainbow, or I was talking to God about there has to be light at the end of the rainbow, and right when I'm speaking those words, I turn a corner and I see a rainbow. Some of the most magnificent rainbows I've ever seen in my life. I drove under a rainbow coming down a hill. The rainbow was arced over the road like a cartoon. One side was on one side of the road, and the other side of the rainbow was on the other side of the road, and I drove right underneath it. One of the rainbows was so magnificent, people were slowing down and staring at it and looking at it. These are some of the major points of the testimony that I have concerning Joy Kopu. Christine Joy Elizabeth Kopu.